What happens when one woman walks into a hearing with a folder full of secrets and leaves with an entire nation watching? It was just after 9 a.m., but the air in the Capitol already felt like it was pushing back against everyone who breathed it. Outside, storm clouds gathered like an omen. Inside, the House Oversight Committee chamber buzzed. Not with noise, but with anticipation. Reporters adjusted their tripods and mics with the kind of twitchy energy that comes before a verdict or a scandal. No one knew what would happen, but everyone sensed it. Something was coming. Representative Jasmine Crockett walked in without an entourage. No PR handler, no loud announcement. Just her, a perfectly pressed navy blue blazer and a plain manila folder clutched tightly in one hand. She didn't strut. She didn't smile. She simply moved, quiet, composed, and terrifyingly calm. Every step toward her seat sounded louder than it should have, echoing slightly in the vaulted chamber, as if the building itself wanted to listen. Marjorie Taylor Greene was already there, reclined slightly in her seat, one arm draped over the backrest with casual confidence. Her signature smirk was plastered across her face like it was born there. Around her, a few of her allies chuckled softly at some private joke. It was supposed to be just another hearing, more grandstanding, more rehearsed outrage. But as Jasmine sat down and placed the manila folder on the polished desk in front of her, the room changed. It was subtle at first, a shift in posture. The way one cameraman leaned in. The way a journalist stopped typing mid-sentence. Then she opened the folder. Just one paper. That's all she pulled out. One white sheet placed carefully, precisely on the desk like it was a detonator, and in that moment, the entire room stopped breathing. Jasmine adjusted her glasses. Her eyes were steady, her expression unreadable. Then, with a calm that could cut steel, she leaned forward, pressed the microphone, and spoke. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," she began, her tone low but unshakable. "Before we proceed, I'd like to enter new evidence into the record." The room didn't make a sound. No shuffling papers, no coughs, just silence, as if the air itself was waiting. Across from her, Greene's eyes narrowed. Her smirk didn't falter, but it stopped growing. "This document outlines a campaign fund transfer," Jasmine continued, "to an entity that, upon investigation, appears to be a shell company. No office, no employees, no tax filings, and no legal reason for $130,000 to be deposited there." There it was, the first crack. Greene's hand shifted slightly. Just a twitch, but enough. The air thickened. Jasmine didn't look at her. Not yet. She turned the paper slightly so the committee chair could see. "The first of many," she added. Someone whispered in the gallery. A journalist clicked their pen but didn't write. Eyes flicked between the folder and Greene's face, looking for a tremble, but Jasmine didn't pause. "What we're about to discuss today isn't politics," she said, her voice cutting through the stillness like a scalpel. "It's not party lines or petty rivalries. It's about the kind of truth that institutions are built to ignore, and what happens when that truth walks into the room, unafraid." Now, Greene sat upright. No more lounging. Her hands clasped in front of her, fingers tightening ever so. Slightly. Jasmine finally turned to her, just briefly. A glance, calculated, cold. "I hope you're ready," she said. Not as a threat, but a fact. And in that single moment, everyone watching, from the committee members to the millions who would soon see it online, knew this wasn't just another hearing. This was the beginning of something that would rip through Washington like wildfire. The silence that followed Jasmine's opening remarks wasn't empty. It was loaded. Loaded with disbelief, calculation, and the collective realization that the script had just been torn apart. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not here. Not like this. Greene leaned forward slightly, her lips parting as if to speak, but Jasmine was already moving. She slid out a second page from the folder. This, one marked with bold red highlights and official letterhead. Her voice remained calm, almost eerily composed. "This is a bank record," she said, holding it up so the cameras could catch a glimpse. "It traces campaign funds to an LLC registered in Delaware. The LLC has no listed employees, no operating website, and no physical office." She let that sit for a moment before adding, "But it does have one recurring transaction, monthly payments to a private account held in the name of someone directly connected to this committee." Gasps weren't audible, but you could feel them. Greene straightened in her chair. "That's a lie," she spat, louder than she meant to. The sudden noise felt jarring in the room's tightened atmosphere. "You're cherry-picking garbage." From political enemies. But Jasmine didn't even turn her head. She reached for another sheet. "This is a flight manifest. It shows travel from D.C. to Scottsdale on a private jet owned by a man currently under federal investigation for wire fraud." She finally looked up. Her eyes met Greene's like ice locking onto fire. "The same man," she said, "who donated over $80,000 to your campaign, and who also happens to be listed as a consultant on the same shell company receiving those diverted funds." Greene's face twitched, barely, but enough. Her lawyer, seated 2 rows behind, scribbled something frantically on a yellow legal pad and pushed it toward an aide. "Stop twisting this," Greene snapped, louder now, her voice rising with the threat of panic. "This is political theater. You want a headline, that's all." Jasmine paused, not because she was rattled, but because she wanted the moment to breathe, to settle into the walls. Then she leaned forward again and said, with devastating calm, "If this is theater, then why does every scene come with receipts?" A murmur rippled through the room, staffers glancing at each other, reporters adjusting their angles, even members of the committee shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Outside, on Twitter, the first clips had already gone live. One journalist whispered, "This is bigger than anyone thought." Inside, Greene's voice faltered. Her bravado, usually unshakable, began to show its cracks. Jasmine placed her hands on the folder again. Her voice was now softer, but somehow even more dangerous. "This is not speculation. This is not a smear. This is what happens," she said, "when accountability finds the people who swore they were untouchable." And for the first time, Greene didn't speak. She couldn't, because somewhere deep down, behind the cameras, beneath the sound bites, she knew. This wasn't going away. The chair creaked under Greene as she shifted, her body stiff like a tower, about to tip. For once, the heat wasn't just coming from across the aisle. It was inside the walls, in the air, crawling under her skin. Jasmine didn't miss a beat. She lifted the third document, a printed email thread. Not just one email, dozens. The headers alone read like a roadmap to political rot. Subject lines referencing alternative financing, third-party clearance, and one chilling phrase that stood out in bold: no paper trail, no liability. She held it up. These emails were exchanged between Greene's senior campaign advisor and a financial consulting firm registered offshore, 3 weeks before the funds began to disappear. The chairman leaned forward, visibly unsettled. A Democratic member of the committee whispered something under their breath. And on the far end of the panel, a Republican congressman rubbed his temples with both hands. Greene slammed her hand on the table. "Objection! These are private communications. Illegally obtained?" Jasmine cut her off with nothing but stillness. "No one's above the law," she said. "Not even you." The calm in her voice was no longer quiet. It was commanding. It echoed not just through the room, but through the country. Social media was already ablaze. News networks had cut away from scheduled coverage. C-SPAN had never had this many live viewers. Subreddits were exploding with freeze frames and slow-motion analysis of Greene's every blink. And Jasmine kept going. "On page 6, she said, turning the page deliberately, "you'll see an internal memo. It connects Greene to a lobbying group advocating for deregulation in the energy sector. What's not disclosed publicly is that she holds a silent equity stake in one of the companies that stood to profit." More silence. But this time it wasn't. Confusion. It was dread. She let that moment simmer, then asked one question, direct and surgical. Did you vote on that bill while owning financial interest in its outcome? Greene didn't answer. Her lawyer stood up in the back of the room and mouthed, "Cut the mic." But the mic was hot. The cameras were hot. The country was boiling. Jasmine leaned in one final time, her voice a whisper but clear as thunder. You built your image on draining the swamp. Tell me, what do you call this? The chairman banged the gavel, but it was meaningless. The room had transformed. This was no longer a hearing. It was a reckoning, a slow, public unraveling, recorded in high definition. And as the gavel's echo faded, one thing had never been clearer. The fall had begun. Outside the committee room, the hallway was packed shoulder to shoulder with journalists, aides, interns, and congressional staffers pretending not to listen. Inside, the oxygen felt thinner, as if truth itself had pulled all the air from the room. Greene sat rigid, her jaw clenched so tightly the vein in her neck visibly pulsed. Her bravado had vanished, leaving behind something far more dangerous: desperation. But Jasmine Crockett didn't stop. She carefully unfolded another document. "This is a calendar log," she said, "with timestamps showing repeated meetings between Representative Greene and the CEO of Northridge Energy Solutions. These meetings weren't disclosed to the Ethics Committee, nor were they included in the congressional visitor logs." Gasps, audible this time. Jasmine glanced around, not to seek approval, but to gauge who still had the stomach for truth. "And this," she said, lifting a final sheet from her folder, "is a photograph taken in July. That's Representative Greene on a private yacht owned by the same CEO, off the coast of the Cayman Islands." She placed the photo face up on the table. For a second, even the chairman looked stunned. Greene reached for the photo, instinctively, then pulled her hand back as if touching it might confirm everything. "You photoshopped this," she hissed, but her voice was weak. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "It's a live photo. You can press and see it move." Someone did. A reporter in the back had already sourced it. A slow-motion clip was now circulating online. Greene laughing, drink in hand, waving to someone off camera. Live. Undeniable. Then Jasmine asked the question that tore through the heart of the hearing. If your policies were shaped on that deck, what else in this room is for sale? The words landed like a punch. Reporters dropped their pens and grabbed their phones. The congressional feed was now the most watched stream in the nation. The chairman opened his mouth to call for recess, but paused. Even he knew this moment couldn't be paused. And then Greene did something no one expected. She laughed, a short, bitter laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "You think you're so righteous?" she spat. "You think this changes anything?" Jasmine didn't flinch. "No," she said softly. "I think this reveals everything." And with that, she closed the folder. She was done. But the room wasn't. The chairman declared a recess. Greene stormed out, her lawyer trailing behind. Cameras followed. Staffers whispered. Phones buzzed. And in the silence Jasmine left behind, one truth echoed louder than ever. She didn't just challenge power. She embarrassed it. By the time the committee reconvened, the building no longer felt like Capitol Hill. It felt like a fault line, seconds before the quake. Everyone had seen the footage. The yacht, the emails, the silence. Every TV and every congressional office played the moment Jasmine laid down that final page, like it was the Zapruder film of political accountability. But Jasmine? She was calm. She returned to her seat without ceremony. No smirk, no satisfaction, just the same measured composure that now haunted the halls of power. Staffers whispered as she walked past. Greene, on the other hand, didn't return. Her seat sat empty, a silent monument to everything she hadn't answered for. The chairman looked around awkwardly before adjusting his mic. "We'll continue this hearing without Representative Greene present." But everyone knew the hearing was already over. What followed were statements from other committee members, some outraged, others scrambling to control the narrative. One member called for an immediate ethics investigation. Another questioned whether Crockett had overstepped. But each time someone tried to shift the blame or dilute the impact, the footage spoke louder. Every single outlet ran the same headline: Jasmine Crockett brings receipts, and Washington can't look away. In her district back home, schools paused class to stream the hearing. In coffee shops from Chicago to Savannah, people watched like it was a championship game. For once, America wasn't arguing over spin. They were watching something undeniable. And Jasmine? She didn't take a victory lap. Instead, she stood up quietly and addressed the room one last time. This isn't a partisan moment. This isn't a gotcha. This is what happens when we forget who we work for. She folded the manila folder shut. And, in case anyone forgot, it's the people. Then she walked out. Just like that. No press conference, no interviews. And yet, her absence screamed louder than Greene's collapse. That night, late into the evening, lights stayed on in congressional offices. Phone lines rang nonstop. Donors pulled out. Consultants panicked. Allies distanced themselves from Greene faster than reporters could keep up. But in one quiet corner of Washington, a single office light flickered off. Jasmine Crockett had gone home, because the job was done, for now. The next morning, Washington woke up to smoke, not the kind that rises from fire, but the kind that rises when the walls start to burn from within. Greene's office released a statement at dawn. Fabricated, political theater, a smear campaign. But the footage was everywhere. News anchors didn't even bother reading her words. They just played the clip over and over. Jasmine sliding the folder forward, Greene freezing. The silence, the image, the question. By noon, the hashtag #JoshGreeneleaks was trending worldwide, and Jasmine, she was nowhere to be found. No interviews, no tweets, not even a hallway quote for reporters. She vanished into the very district she'd said she served, like a ghost returning to her roots, while the storm she summoned kept howling across the Capitol. That absence made her louder. At CNN, a panelist said, "You know what's terrifying about Jasmine Crockett? She doesn't want to be famous for this. That's what makes her dangerous." At Fox, a commentator raged, "This is a hit job, a setup. She had this ready. This was premeditated warfare." But the receipts were real. The documents had been authenticated by independent outlets. The flight logs matched. The bank records cross-verified. Even the yacht manifest, once suspected to be a fake, was confirmed by maritime authorities. Truth had entered the room and refused to leave. In a New York Times editorial, the headline read, "Crockett didn't break the system. She held up a mirror." In the Capitol, a quiet fear crept through both parties. If Crockett could do this to Greene, what could she do to anyone else? Who else had paper trails they thought were buried? Who else had something to hide? And that's when the whispers began. Did she act alone? Is there more? Was this just the beginning? Committee members started receiving anonymous envelopes, documents they hadn't seen before, tips from staffers, data dumps, names, dates, locations. It was as if truth had gotten a taste of daylight and refused to go back underground. And Jasmine? She was still silent. But her silence no longer felt like absence. It felt like strategy. Because maybe, just maybe, she knew this was only phase one. It started with a single envelope slid under a senator's door late at night. No return address. No fingerprints, just a USB drive labeled, "You should have listened." Within hours, it began. A second hearing was announced, not just on Greene but on financial misconduct across party lines. Jasmine hadn't accused a party. She had accused a pattern. And now names from both sides were being whispered in backrooms, and still, she said nothing. She didn't need to. In her silence, a movement began. Young interns photocopied receipts. Junior staffers leaked inconsistencies. The entire Hill turned into a leaking ship, and Jasmine had simply pointed at the hole. Then came the subpoenas. Greene was officially under investigation by the House Ethics Committee. Donors withdrew. PACs paused endorsements. Her inner circle shrank. The once untouchable firebrand was suddenly radioactive, and Jasmine, she was on a school visit in her district, reading books to children, shaking hands with local shop owners, listening, not preaching. One reporter finally caught up with her outside a library. "Congresswoman, do you have any comment on the chaos your hearing caused?" She adjusted her glasses, just like she did that day, looked the camera straight, in the lens, and said, "Truth isn't chaos, it's correction." That quote hit like a thunderclap. The final blow came days later, when a second congressperson, this time from Greene's own party, resigned quietly, citing personal reasons. But the document said otherwise. Jasmine hadn't even named him. But her message had been clear. If you've got something to hide, your time is borrowed. And for the first time in a long time, Washington listened. Legislation was proposed to increase transparency in campaign funding. Oversight committees saw their budgets doubled. Public interest surged in hearings that were once forgotten. The people were watching now, and they weren't blinking. Jasmine never declared victory. There was no parade, no speech, no "I told you so," just her voice echoing from the day it all began. This isn't about partisanship. It's about trust. And somehow, in a town built on performance, one woman's refusal to perform had broken the script. The nation watched a hearing, and what they saw wasn't politics. It was accountability, unapologetic, undeniable, unafraid, and, maybe, for once, that was enough. So what now? Was this the start of a new era, or just a moment of clarity before the darkness returns? Will they fix what's broken, or bury it deeper than before? What do you think? Has Washington really changed, or did Jasmine just expose what we already knew? Drop your thoughts below, and if this story shook you, share it, because the truth doesn't need a stage. It needs witnesses.